Frank Klose. Of course, his Phillies Mailbag is open right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. 609-403-0973. Send us a text. Your Phillies questions. Phillies lose 4-2 last night to the Yankees. They'll finish up that series tonight and tomorrow at Citizens Bank Park. Will there be a game? Better bet. The Phillies will have more fans than the Yankees at one of these games.
I would say no, sir. No, sir. No, I do not believe that to be the case.
It's a strong no.
Not the least. I saw a tweet last night like, Yankees fans must be real pleased. They can actually go to a stadium and park for a reasonable price right near it.
All right, let's bring Frank in. The mailbag is bullpen, and more bullpen.
Understandably so.
Let's get into it now with Frank Klose from 97.3 ESPN.com. He joins us now. What's up, Frank?
What's up, guys?
A lot of bullpen questions. As the Phillies. Do you think that the handling of the bullpen and the bullpen in general is this team's biggest issue?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, if you really think about it, if you had two arms that were reliable, that got you regular outs, would the Phillies be where they are now, just a few games out, or might they actually be in first place? I think the argument can be made that that's the one thing holding this team back right now, even though we know that there are some offensive areas that have struggled at times. I mean, I think this difference between the Braves and the Phillies can be explained by the bullpen.
You look at what the Phillies have in the starting rotation. You got Velasquez, you got Eflin, you got Pivetta. I'm assuming that's going to be, a choice there. When Eichhoff is ready, and who knows when that's going to be, do one of those guys move into a bullpen role?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. That was not something I considered yet. When kind of going through these mailbag questions. With Jared Eichhoff, I kind of want to see it to believe it. It looked like he was on the comeback trail before. We were kind of talking through that question before, and wouldn't you know, he has a little setback. So, I mean, I did talk to him last week. I did ask him how he was feeling. He seemed like he said he felt good. He seemed like he was ready to go again, and he's going to start pitching for Lehigh Valley soon. I see him listed on the roster there. So really, that seems like that's too presumptuous at this point, given the struggles he's had. But you got to think that there's room for somebody there, whether it's not even in a key role, but even in a kind of a long relief role, because Mark Leiter didn't really hang around for long in that role either.
Yeah, the situation that they currently have in the bullpen, do you think, and we'll get into the mailbag questions here in a second, but do you think that Neshek returning will stabilize some things in this bullpen?
I think so. I did keep an eye on his first rehab appearance in Clearwater. He struck out 2 of the 3 that he had. He was hanging around the team yesterday, which means that he's probably about to go to Reading or Lehigh Valley. I didn't see an update on that, but he's up here to be in Pennsylvania. He's here to pitch soon. And, just think about it, too. You talk about the bullpen. If you had 2017 Pat Neshek right now, that's good enough for a couple more wins in itself because, he was steady as it went. Now, remember, he only pitched an inning at a time. He didn't usually pitch on back-to-back days that often, but he was money in the bank. So hopefully he actually really is fully healthy. And even though he's up there in years, since it's going to be a shorter season, hopefully this is something that he can kind of carry them down the stretch because, if he's even half of what he was last year, that's a tremendous boost to this Phillies team.
Frank Klose with us. The mailbag's open, and Frank, Hector Neris is back. That wasn't a very long trip down to the minors for Hector Neris. Ed wants to know, wait a second, what's he doing back?
It's really funny how many tweets I got during last night's game when this came out. Why is Hector Neris back? Well, for the Phillies, I think Hector Neris is really a key piece to whether or not they're going to be successful. Now, they built this bullpen for this season kind of based upon Hector Neris doing what he did last season. If you remember, he saved 20 games in a row to conclude the season in 2017. So it seems like they really had something. I tend to believe that perhaps since there's no real drop in velocity, that some of his struggles were absolutely mental at this point. And, the Phillies weren't in a really good situation. Edubray Ramos has, he's kind of quietly been one of their top relievers. All the attention on Dominguez kind of coming in and saving the day. But Edubray Ramos was pitching to an ERA in the low ones. He won 2 games, didn't lose any games. And they lost a really important reliever to the disabled list with what they're calling a right shoulder impingement. So really, when he went down, the other choices for the immediate really weren't all that great. You have Drew Anderson on the 40-man roster. Do you necessarily want to mess with somebody like Ben Lively and throw him back in? They could have grabbed Jake Thompson again because he was, he was. When you have an injury, you don't have to worry about the person being in the minor leagues for 10 days, as we saw with Neris. But it seems like Neris went down to AAA. He seemed like he was a little bit humbled by the experience, and when he got there, he was all about business. So I think at this point, they thought maybe the message was sent, and they really need him to be the Hector Neris of old to really replace the Ramos of 2018. He was kind of one of the unsung heroes on this Phillies team so far.
And he certainly was pretty good last night. 13 pitches, 7 of them for strikes, 2 strikeouts. The splitter was working for Hector Neris. That's just one piece of the bullpen, though, Frank. Tim wants to know, overall, how do we fix this mess in the bullpen, says Tim?
Well, for this question, I kind of focused on what the Phillies might be able to do externally. And I think we saw just in the NL East last year that a team could really turn things around really fast just by adding a couple pieces to a bullpen. Now, last year, the Washington Nationals were just like the Phillies team. The thing that was really, really killing them was their bullpen. And they went out and they acquired not 1, not 2, but 3 relievers. They went and grabbed Sean Doolittle and Ryan Madsen from the Oakland Athletics to give them a lefty and a righty. And Doolittle has been the team's closer. And then they went and got Brandon Kinsler from the Minnesota Twins, who was the Twins closer at the time. And so 3 pieces really changed things dramatically for the Washington Nationals, just like that. Now, the Phillies would like to go outside of the organization probably if they have a good opportunity. But what I think what's kind of the holdup is that they really don't want to trade any of their young talent unless they're getting somebody back that's not going to be with them for more than 1 year. So the names like Brad Hand of the San Diego Padres come to mind. And then if you look at the Cincinnati Reds, their young closer is also somebody who is going to be available perhaps if the right price is given to the Cincinnati Reds, who, by the way, are one of the basement teams right now. Raisel Iglesias is their closer. Those are the types of guys I think they're going to want back. Now, we've spoken before that we felt they missed out on Kelvin Herrera, which the Nationals, again, they went and got. But it's a really tough landscape right now to make a trade because when you look around baseball, not that many teams are out of it right now. You even look at a team like the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're 4 games below 500, right? So if they have a hot week, all of a sudden they're back into the wild card discussion. And so there's enough teams kind of hanging around that not many have players available. But if you look at the NL specifically, the basement, you'll find the Padres, you'll find the Reds, and you were just talking about the Baltimore Orioles a moment ago being a terrible team right now, but they don't really necessarily have a lot to trade until they find out if Zach Britton is healthy or not. So I think the problem is there's too many teams in contention, and you really can't find a team yet who's willing to sort of unload until they know for sure that they're out of it. And there's probably part of the Phillies which wants to see that they're in it before they go and give up any talent for any short-term solution.
It's interesting that you say that, Frank, because we were just talking to Dave Sheehan from the Washington Post, who wrote an article about tanking and how it's really ruined baseball, and there's just a bunch of haves and have-nots, and here you are saying how many teams are in contention. How many teams legitimately believe they're in contention? Record-wise and games behind-wise they might be, but is that just a proponent that everybody wants to be bad?
I actually tend to disagree with him, and I did get to listen to that segment. I think baseball is not you really talked about a lot of this stuff. It's not really easy to tank like it is in the NBA, where you sign that impact player in the draft and you're off and running. I mean, the Phillies essentially got Mickey Moniak because there really wasn't any super impact type player in the draft, and every MLB draft doesn't have that person. So, I mean, it's really all about kind of accumulating the assets for later, and that often comes at the expense of trading your veteran guys and trying to develop some people that you can trade. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily tanking. I mean, when you talk about the teams in contention now, they still have fan bases. They want to come out and see them. They want them to buy a ticket. And unless you're one of those teams in the very, very deep basement, and there aren't a whole lot of them if you look around baseball. And, like in the NL, you got the Padres, you've got the Reds. Both teams, by the way, tried to win, as something that you were just discussing. The Marlins and the Mets. I mean, they're the only ones in the NL that seem like they're out of it right now. And of those four teams, I think they all tried to win. I think the Reds didn't expect to fire their manager almost immediately upon the season beginning. They did spend some money. Even the Reds spent some money this offseason to try to get a few pieces. But it's the landscape being what it is with the second wild card. A lot of those teams are sitting around thinking, well, if I have a hot week, guess what? I'm right back in it. And I think they want to sell that to their fans too. I mean, whether they believe it or not. If you're the Pittsburgh Pirates, you want your fans to come out. 4 games under 500 isn't the worst thing in the world. You have a nice, you sweep one team, maybe win another game. You're right back there in the middle of it, and that's probably what's the big conundrum right now for a lot of teams.
Frank Klose with us. The mailbag's open, and Frank, we talked a minute ago about external options to fix the bullpen. What kind of internal options might be available to help the Phillies fix the bullpen? Bill's inquiring about that.
Well, what I'm really thinking, when you look at AAA, you see Angel De Los Santos. He's the guy that the Padres traded for Freddie Galvis, and he has just been dominant at AAA. He's got 3 losses and 7 wins, and of his 3 losses, he gave up 3 runs, 1 run in those losses. And those 3 runs he gave up 2 times were the only time all year he's given up 3 runs. He seems like he's ready to come up and join the starting rotation. Now, the tricky thing at that point was, if you bring him into your rotation, can you indeed take one of the starters already there? Now, this doesn't even factor Jared Eichhoff into the equation yet, but can you take Zach Eflin, can you take Vince Velasquez and make them into a reliever? Now, of those 2, I tend to think that Zach Eflin has a better shot. Zach Eflin is having a great season this year because his fastball has increased in velocity a couple miles an hour. And Eflin is the kind of guy that he has an okay secondary pitch, but he doesn't really have a third or fourth pitch. And, when you're a starter, if you want to go deep into games, you kind of have to mix those things in later as the batters see you a few times in the order. So I think someone like Eflin can come in and give you a solid inning. He only needs to worry about using his 2 best pitches. He might be able to get you a solid 8th inning. He might be able to even get you a solid 9th inning, even though he's not the stereotypical come in and throw 100 and strike everybody out. Now, the thing about Velasquez that worries me, we've been saying as long as Vince Velasquez has been a Philly, should this guy be a closer? Well, I think last night when you saw him enter that Yankees game, he was kind of all over the place early, right? He was all revved up. I think even the commentators and on Twitter, everybody was saying this guy needs to settle down some. He's just overthrowing. And you got to ask yourself the question: if you're relying on somebody like him for the last few outs of the game to be his only outs of the game, will he settle into that role? And I think that's a real question there. Now, at the end of the night, when Velasquez was done, you had people saying, okay, well, if you saw the way this started, you might be very happy with 6 innings and 1 run allowed. But you got to question, is Velasquez the type that needs to settle into a game after a rough start, which makes me kind of nervous about him maybe being a back-end reliever, but you never really know until you try. And I think that when you consider what happened with Brett Myers in 2007, a young team that was pretty good like this one, and taking a starter like Brett Myers, who jumped to the back of the bullpen, not as a demotion, but to sort of save the season. I mean, that one move made the Phillies a playoff team in 2007. As the Phillies if you looked at the list of relievers in 2007, you'd be absolutely shocked that these players ever played in Major League Baseball, right? Let alone all pitched on the 2007 Phillies. So a move like that might be just what stabilizes the team. And if you're one of these players, if you look at the likes of the contracts that Tommy Hunter got and Pat Neshek got, you might make more money as a back-end reliever than you do as a fourth or fifth starter in the major league. And kind of that's what those guys are right now. So there might be a real incentive for them to try to learn a new craft.
All right, Frank Klose, at Frank Klose on Twitter. Don't forget his mailbag every Tuesday right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, guys.